The first thing they told me about Dante Salvatore was this: no woman lasted more than a week inside his mansion. 7 days. That was the curse. The whispered countdown that followed every bride who crossed his threshold. Some ran in terror before the second sunrise. Others cracked under his silence, his rage, his eyes that cut deeper than his scars. A few left in the back of ambulances, trembling, broken, swearing never to speak his name again, and the unlucky ones, well, no one dared to ask what became of them. Dante Salvatore was more legend than man. They said he was forged in the fires of war between rival families, his skin and soul carved by betrayal. The jagged scar that ran from his temple down across his cheek and disappeared beneath his collar was proof of battles survived, and battles still raging inside him. His cruelty. No woman lasted, none dared to stay. And yet, as the heavy wrought iron gates of his estate creaked open and the black car carried me inside, I wasn't shaking like the others had. My hand brushed the scar on my own cheek, a brutal slash that marred my face and told my story before I ever spoke it. Dante Salvatore thought he could break me with scars and fury. He was mistaken. I had already been broken, and I'd already learned how to live again. The Salvatore estate loomed like a fortress on the edge of upstate New York, hidden from the world by walls of stone and secrets. Iron gates, armed guards with rifles strapped across their chests, a driveway long enough to swallow doubt and courage alike. Inside, it was all shadows and marble, a palace for a king who ruled by fear. The chandelier dripped with crystal, but the air was cold, sterile, like no laughter had ever dared to live here. The walls whispered of women who'd come before me, women who'd fled screaming or left in silence, their spirits broken. The men who escorted me in didn't bother with kindness. One shoved my suitcase into the corner of the grand hall. Another barked that the boss would see me when he was ready. I lifted my chin, refusing to shrink. My scar caught the light, and one of them smirked, muttering under his breath, "She won't last the week." If only he knew. The first time I saw Dante Salvatore, he wasn't seated like a king. He wasn't behind a desk commanding from a throne of power. He was standing in the doorway of his study, a glass of whiskey dangling from one hand, his eyes fixed on me with the weight of judgment. Dante Salvatore was taller than I'd expected, broad-shouldered, dangerous in every line of his frame. But it was his face that stole my breath for a moment. The scar that carved through his cheek, the darkness in his eyes. Not because I feared him, but because I recognized him. Scars recognize scars. "You're the new bride." His voice was gravel, low and disinterested, as if the very words were an inconvenience. "I'm Isabella," I said simply. His lip curled. "Names don't matter here." He stepped closer, shadows clinging to him like loyal dogs. "What matters is this: you'll either obey, or you'll be gone by the week's end." He slammed his glass down on the table hard enough to make it shatter. Shards scattered at my feet. I didn't move. Most women would have flinched. I stayed still. Dante's eyes narrowed. "You're not afraid," he demanded. I tilted my head, letting my scar catch his gaze. "You can't break me," I whispered. "I've already survived worse than you." The silence that followed was suffocating. His men shifted uncomfortably. No one had ever spoken to him like that, at least not a woman who lived to tell it. His jaw tightened, a storm brewed behind his eyes. Then, with a sharp flick of his wrist, he dismissed everyone else from the room. The doors shut, leaving only him and me. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now let's continue. A week ago, I was still Isabella Moretti, the scarred girl everyone pitied but no one respected. My life had been quiet, deliberately invisible. I worked in a flower shop in Brooklyn, hands buried in roses and lilies, pretending the thorns couldn't still cut me. My father's debts to the Salvatore family dragged me here. Giovanni Moretti was a gambler, reckless, and when his luck finally ran out, his signature bought my fate. Marriage for forgiveness, that's what they called it. But we both knew the truth. I was collateral. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt strangely calm, because I knew monsters. I had lived with one. My first husband had taught me pain so deep it marked me forever. And if I had survived him, I could survive Dante Salvatore. The first night, Dante tried his usual games. Doors slammed hard enough to rattle the walls. His voice barked commands, sharp and cruel. Sit, stay silent, don't look at me. Each word was a test, a push, a search for the weakness that would send me running. Instead, I hummed softly as I unpacked my clothes. A song my mother used to sing, a melody that filled the mansion's halls with something foreign. Warmth. His footsteps thundered toward me. Do you think this is your home? I looked at him calmly, folding one last dress. I live here now until you send me away. Until then, why shouldn't I act like it? The corner of his scarred mouth twitched, almost a smirk before he crushed it away. Later that night, I found him standing by the window, city lights bleeding into the darkness. He turned when I entered, a gun dangling from his hand like a toy. He lifted it, pointed it at me. The barrel was cold, black, promising death. I didn't move. He stepped closer, eyes sharp, waiting for the scream, the tears, the begging. It never came. Pull the trigger if you must, I said, steady as stone. But you won't scare me. You're not the worst thing I've survived. The silence between us stretched thin, electric, and then he lowered the gun. Not because he wanted to, because for the first time in years he didn't know what else to do. That was the moment Dante Salvatore realized I was not like the others. That was the moment the scarred woman refused to fear the Mafia boss. I woke before dawn the next morning, not because I feared what Dante might do, but because old habits never died. Survival had taught me to rise early, to find quiet moments before the world turned violent. The mansion was eerily silent, a giant tomb of polished marble and cold air. I padded into the kitchen barefoot, finding rows of gleaming stainless steel, untouched pans, and a refrigerator stocked with delicacies meant for men who devoured power, not food. I pulled out eggs, flour, and sugar. My hands moved instinctively, mixing, whisking, kneading. Soon the scent of fresh bread filled the kitchen, warm and stubbornly alive against the sterile chill of the mansion. When the guards passed through, they blinked in shock. One muttered, "She's cooking," as if I were breaking some sacred law. I was, because fear wasn't going to be my cage here. If this place was to be my prison, I would make it feel like my home. Dante found me an hour later, humming softly while slicing fruit. The slam of the door echoed like thunder. He stormed toward me, his black shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his scar carved in sharp relief by the morning light. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was fire and ice all at once. "Breakfast," I said, gesturing to the plate of eggs on the counter. "Hungry?" His jaw tightened. "This isn't your kitchen. This isn't your home." I met his eyes, steady, unflinching. "Then send me away. Until you do, I'll live like I belong." His chest rose sharply, as though my calm words struck harder than any insult. He took a step closer, looming, waiting for me to cower. Instead, I slid a plate toward him. "Eat something. You look tired." For a moment, just a heartbeat, I thought he might flip the plate and scatter food across the floor. But instead, his hand twitched. Then he grabbed a fork and stabbed at the eggs with silent fury. He ate, and I smiled, humming again as I turned back to the stove. That became our rhythm. Dante tried to shake me, to remind me who held the power here. He barked orders. He shattered glasses. He warned me of what happened to women who disobeyed. But I didn't shrink. I walked the halls as though I owned them, humming to myself, brushing my fingers over the velvet curtains and the cold marble banisters. I opened windows to let light in something none of his men dared to do. "Do you ever shut up?" he snapped one evening as my humming drifted into his study. "Only when I sleep," I said, passing him without hesitation. His eyes followed me cold and burning at once, and for the first time I saw it, curiosity. He began speaking to me more, though never gently. "You don't belong here," he told me one night at dinner. "Neither do you," I replied, cutting into my food. His scar twitched with the ghost of a smirk before it disappeared again. Another time he cornered me in the hall, his voice sharp. "Why don't you cry? Why don't you scream like the others?" I held his gaze. "Because I don't waste my tears on men who want them." His breath hitched, almost imperceptibly. He leaned closer, his shadow swallowing mine. "Careful, Isabella. You don't know what you're playing with." "Neither do you," I whispered back. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. It was deep into the night when I heard it, the sound that didn't belong. A strangled cry, a muffled shout, the crash of glass. I followed the sound to Dante's room. The heavy oak door was cracked open. He tossed violently in his sleep, his scarred face twisted with agony, his chest heaving as sweat drenched his shirt. The lamp by his bedside had already fallen, shattered on the floor. "No," he gasped, thrashing. "Not again. Don't take her." For a moment I stood frozen, torn between leaving and stepping closer. Every warning screamed that I shouldn't, but my heart moved my feet before my head could stop them. I sat on the edge of his bed, my hand trembling as I reached for him. "Dante," I whispered, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Wake up. It's just a dream." His eyes flew open, wild, feral. He grabbed my wrist in an iron grip, the gun on his nightstand flashing in the dim light as his other hand reached for it. I didn't move, didn't flinch. "It's me," I said softly. "Isabella, you're safe." His breath came ragged, his grip loosening as recognition bled into his gaze. The fury drained, leaving only exhaustion, only scars. "You're already broken," I whispered, brushing my thumb over the scar that marred his cheek. "Let me stay, and maybe we'll heal together." For the first time, he didn't push me away. For the first time, he let someone touch the scar that ruled his life. He stared at me, his hand still hovering near the gun, his chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Then slowly, hesitantly, he lowered the weapon, his fingers trembling as they released it back to the nightstand. His eyes locked on mine, raw, unguarded, and he whispered the words I never expected from the most feared man in New York. "Don't leave." 4 weeks later, I thought surviving inside the Salvatore mansion would be the hardest part. I was wrong. The hardest part was surviving my own memories. Every time I caught my reflection in the gilded mirrors that lined the mansion halls, my scar sneered back at me, a cruel reminder of the man who once promised to love me, only to carve his betrayal into my skin. My first husband. The whispers in the Mafia world painted Dante as a monster, but I knew monsters wore softer faces too. Faces that kissed you in the morning, whispered sweet lies at night, and then turned into fists and knives when no one was looking. Dante's violence was open, honest in its brutality. My first husband's was hidden, polished with charm and lies, and that made it worse. The bond between Dante and me had grown in strange, fragile threads. The man who once barked orders now lingered in the kitchen when I cooked, leaning against the counter like he couldn't decide if he wanted to scold me or stay close. One night, after another silent dinner, I found him in the library poring over old ledgers. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes deeper than usual. "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" he asked suddenly, his voice sharp. "Like what?" I hesitated, then crossed the room, my scar catching the lamplight. "Like you're human? Because you are. You just forgot." His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "You've seen things," he said, almost accusingly. "The way you don't flinch, the way you don't run. You've lived through something worse. What was it?" For a moment, I thought of lying, of hiding the truth behind my scar, the way I always did. But for reasons I couldn't explain, I wanted him to know. "My husband," I whispered. "Ex-husband. He thought he owned me, that my body was his battlefield." I touched the jagged scar along my cheek. This was his gift. When I finally tried to leave, Dante's expression shifted, the cold mask cracking. Rage flickered there, not at me, but for me. "What happened to him?" he asked. "He's alive," I said, my voice steady. "And worse, he's protected. He has ties to the FBI. He wears his uniform like a shield, hiding his filth behind it." Dante's grip tightened around the glass in his hand until it shattered, blood dripping from his palm. He didn't even flinch. "If he touches you again," he growled, "he dies." I swallowed hard, not from fear, but from the dangerous comfort of knowing he meant it. Word traveled fast in the underworld. It didn't take long before Dante's rivals discovered that I existed. The boss hides behind his scarred bride. They sneered, mocking what they thought was his weakness. It was only a matter of time before my past collided with my present. It happened on a night I'll never forget. Dante had taken me to a gathering, an unspoken declaration to his men and his enemies that I was under his protection. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and expensive suits, but beneath the surface, it was nothing more than a den of wolves in silk. And then he walked in. My ex-husband, Officer Ryan Walsh, charming, clean-cut, wearing his badge like armor and his smile like poison. His eyes locked on mine across the room, and that smile widened. "Well, well," he said loudly, striding toward us. "If it isn't my runaway bride." The room froze. Whispers rippled. Rival bosses smirked, waiting for the spectacle. Dante's hand twitched at his side, ready to reach for the gun he never left behind. But before he could speak, I stepped forward. Ryan's eyes raked over me with cruel amusement. "I see you've traded up from my house to a Mafia boss's bed. Tell me, Isabella, does he know how damaged you really are?" Laughter rippled through the room. I felt the weight of every gaze on my scar, on my trembling hands. But I refused to break. Not here, not ever again. I lifted my chin. My voice was steady, sharp enough to cut through the noise. "He knows everything," I said. "He knows what you did to me. And unlike you, he doesn't mistake scars for weakness." The room went silent. Ryan blinked, thrown off balance. I stepped closer, my voice rising. "You thought you owned me. You thought you destroyed me. But look at me, Ryan. I'm still here. I'm still standing. And I will never be yours again." Gasps filled the air. Even Dante's men looked stunned. And then, as the silence deepened, I felt Dante step beside me, his presence a wall of iron. He slid his coat from his shoulders and draped it over mine, his voice low, lethal. "She belongs to me now," he said. "And if any man here so much as breathes her name with disrespect again, he won't live to regret it." His words weren't just a threat. They were a vow. The ballroom remained frozen, everyone holding their breath as Ryan smirked, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. "Careful, Salvatore," he said, his voice slick with venom. "She's not the prize you think she is. She's your downfall." He brushed past us, leaving whispers and tension in his wake. But I didn't care about the room. I cared about the way Dante's arm brushed against mine, steady, protective, grounding me in the storm. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just surviving inside his world. I was beginning to change it. I thought the confrontation with Ryan would be the climax of my fears. I was wrong. That night was just the beginning. Word of my defiance spread like wildfire. By the next morning, every Mafia table in the city whispered about the scarred woman who stood against the cop. Some mocked me, some admired me. But one truth was clear. I was no longer invisible. Dante paced his office, fury rolling off him in waves. His men kept their distance, pretending to sort through files and weapons while waiting for his next command. Ryan Walsh, Dante spat the name like poison. He shouldn't be breathing. He's using his badge as a shield. The FBI can't touch him, but I can. I stood by the window, watching the courtyard below. Guards patrolled in tighter formations, guns slung across their chests. Ever since the ballroom, the air felt heavier, like the city itself was bracing for war. "Dante," I said carefully, "killing him will only prove him right. He wants you to act rashly. He wants to paint you as the monster." Dante turned sharply, his eyes burning. "And what do you want me to do, Isabella? Watch while he circles you like prey?" For the first time, I didn't back down. "I want you to fight smarter. Not with bullets, with truth." The room went silent. His men pretended not to hear, but their ears were sharp. "You think truth wins wars?" Dante growled. "No," I whispered. "But sometimes it saves souls." For a moment I saw it again, that flicker of something human beneath the Mafia king's mask. The next night, the Salvatore family was ambushed. We were on our way back from a charity gala, a show of power Dante had insisted on attending. He wanted the world to see me at his side, untouched, unbroken. But the world had other plans. Gunfire erupted as our convoy turned onto a darkened street. Bullets shattered glass, tore through metal. Dante shoved me down as the car screeched sideways. His men poured out, returning fire, but the attack was too organized, too precise. Inside, Dante barked, dragging me into a nearby warehouse. His body shielded mine, his arm an unmovable barrier. The attackers followed shadows in the dark, and then I saw him. Ryan. He wasn't holding a gun, but he didn't need one. He stood in the doorway, calm, watching as blood painted the floor. "You don't belong here, Isabella," he called out, his voice echoing. "You think he can protect you? He's the same as me. Violence, destruction, ruin. You'll never escape men like us." Something inside me snapped. I stepped out from behind Dante, ignoring his sharp curse. "No, Ryan," I said, my voice slicing through the chaos. "He isn't like you. He never pretends to be good." The words caught him off guard. His jaw tightened, his mask cracking for the first time. That was when the second wave of gunmen swarmed in. The firefight was brutal. Dante fought like a man possessed, his movements precise, ruthless. But when one of the gunmen aimed directly at him, instinct took over. I moved without thinking. I grabbed the fallen pistol at my feet and fired. The recoil nearly knocked me back, but the bullet found its mark. The gunman collapsed before he could pull the trigger on Dante. For a moment, the warehouse went silent. Dante turned, his eyes locked on me, stunned. "You," he said, his voice low, almost disbelieving. "You saved me." I swallowed hard, the gun trembling in my grip. "I told you, Dante, I don't break." The remaining attackers fled, dragging their wounded with them. Ryan had already vanished into the night, leaving only the echo of his poisonous words behind. When the dust settled, Dante's men buzzed with a mix of shock and awe. No woman had ever stood at the boss's side in battle. Dante approached me slowly, like I was something rare and fragile, yet unshakable. He took the gun from my hand, setting it aside, his fingers brushing mine. "You should be terrified," he murmured. "I am," I admitted. "But I'm more terrified of going back to who I was before." Something broke in him then, or maybe something healed. His forehead pressed against mine, his breath unsteady. "You're mine, Isabella. Not because I demand it, not because I bought it, but because you chose it." And for the first time, I realized he was right. The next morning, a package arrived at the Salvatore mansion. No return address, no note, just a single velvet box. Inside was a blood-stained wedding ring. Ryan's voice echoed in my head, though he wasn't there. "You'll never escape me." And suddenly, I knew this war wasn't just beginning. It was personal. The blood-stained wedding ring haunted me all night. I left it on Dante's desk, the velvet box open like a wound. His men whispered about it in the halls, but no one dared touch it. Everyone knew what it meant. Ryan wasn't finished. He wasn't just threatening me, he was declaring war on Dante. 2 days later, Dante summoned the entire Salvatore family and their allies to the great hall of the mansion. Every capo, every soldier, every business partner sat in tense silence as Dante stood at the head of the table. I stayed by his side, though part of me trembled, not from fear of him, but from the eyes boring into me. Some looked at me with awe, others with scorn. A scarred woman daring to stand where no bride had lasted before. "This war ends tonight," Dante announced, his voice echoing. "Ryan Walsh thinks he can use the law as his shield and fear as his weapon. He's wrong. The Salvatores bow to no man, cop, or king." A murmur of approval rippled through the room. Then he looked at me, and I realized his next words weren't meant for them. They were meant for me. "But this isn't just my war anymore," he said. "It's hers. He came for her." And when he did, she stood with me. She didn't run. She didn't beg. She fought. Gasps filled the hall. No woman had ever been spoken of like that in a Mafia council. "She is my equal," Dante said, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder. "And anyone who disrespects her, disrespects me." It was the first time I saw fear in the eyes of men who had never feared anything. That night, as the Salvatores prepared for retaliation, Ryan made his last move. The mansion gates exploded inward, blown apart by a hidden charge. Gunfire followed, spraying through the courtyard. Shouts echoed, men running to their posts. And then Ryan himself walked through the smoke, no badge, no backup. Just rage. "Isabella," he bellowed, his voice raw. "Come out! You belong to me, not him." I felt Dante stiffen beside me. His hand went for his gun, but I placed mine on his arm. "No," I whispered. "This is mine to end." For a heartbeat, his eyes searched mine, then slowly he nodded. I stepped out into the courtyard, my scar catching the firelight. Ryan froze when he saw me. You think you're strong now? He sneered. You're still the same broken woman I left. Salvatore can't save you? No one can. I lifted my chin, my voice steady. You're right. I am broken. But not the way you think. Every scar you gave me became armor, and you can't touch me anymore. The courtyard fell silent. Even the gunfire paused. Ryan's face twisted with fury. He lunged toward me only for a single shot to crack through the night. Dante's bullet, straight through Ryan's chest. The man crumpled to the ground, shock frozen on his face. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift. As Ryan's body was dragged away, Dante turned to me, his gun still smoking. His eyes softened, something in him finally unshackled. You're not my prisoner, Isabella, he said, his voice breaking. I was yours from the moment you refused to fear me. I stepped closer, my hand brushing the scar on his cheek. And you're mine. Not because of fear, Dante, but because I choose you. The Mafia boss kissed me not as a conqueror, but as a man starved for love. Weeks later, the Salvatore family gathered again. But this time, it wasn't for war. It was for a coronation. Dante stood before them, his suit immaculate, his scars bared without shame. At his side, I wore black silk, my scar exposed for all to see. Look well, Dante declared, his voice thundering. This is Isabella Salvatore, not my bride, not my prisoner. My queen. A rival capo snorted from the crowd. A queen with a broken face? The hall went dead silent. Her scars are proof she's unbreakable, Dante said, eyes blazing. And anyone who dares mock her will answer to me. No one spoke again. And as the hall bowed in silence, I knew one truth would outlive every whisper, every rumor, every threat. I was the bride who lasted forever.